The Elmwood Precinct had a reputation. Nestled in a forgotten corner of the city, it was a crumbling edifice of brick and mortar, where whispers of corruption and neglect were as thick as the dust on the windowsills. Officers came and went, but the dark stories remained. No one stayed long by choice. Officer Jane Whitaker was different. She transferred to Elmwood hoping to make a change. Her first day, she felt the weight of the building's history pressing down on her. The walls seemed to groan under the burden of unspoken secrets, and the flickering fluorescent lights cast long, eerie shadows. The precinct was strangely quiet for a Monday night. Jane found herself alone in the locker room, the silence broken only by the occasional drip from a leaky faucet. As she changed into her uniform, she noticed a peculiar smell, a mix of mildew and something more acrid, like burnt hair. She shrugged it off, chalking it up to the precinct's notorious neglect. Her first assignment was mundane, a stack of cold cases that needed reorganization. As she sifted through the files, Jane's attention was caught by one in particular, the unsolved murder of a former officer, Michael Reynolds. The file was unusually thick, filled with grisly photos and reports of strange occurrences. According to the file, Reynolds had been found in the basement of the precinct, his body mutilated beyond recognition. The official cause of death was listed as mauling by an unknown animal. The gruesome details made her skin crawl, but it was the witness statements that truly unsettled her. Fellow officers reported hearing strange noises, whispers, footsteps, even screams, coming from the basement long after Reynolds had died. A sudden noise broke her concentration. It was faint but unmistakable, the sound of someone sobbing. Jane stood up, listening intently. The sound seemed to be coming from the direction of the basement. Grabbing her flashlight, she decided to investigate. The stairwell to the basement was dark, the light bulbs having burned out long ago. The air grew colder with each step, and the sobbing grew louder, more desperate. Jane's heart pounded in her chest as she reached the bottom of the stairs. The basement was a labyrinth of old filing cabinets and forgotten evidence, the dim beam of her flashlight barely penetrating the thick darkness. "Hello?" Jane called out, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. The sobbing stopped abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence. She advanced slowly, her flashlight sweeping the room. In the far corner she saw it, a figure hunched over, shrouded in shadow. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. She took a step closer, the beam of her flashlight illuminating the figure's face. It was Michael Reynolds. His eyes were wide and vacant, his mouth twisted into a grotesque scream. Blood oozed from deep gashes on his face and neck. Jane stumbled back, her scream caught in her throat. The figure stood up, its movements jerky and unnatural. It started to walk towards her, the sound of its footsteps echoing like a death knell. Panicking, Jane turned and ran, her footsteps pounding up the stairs. She burst into the main office, breathless and pale. Her colleagues looked up in surprise. "What's wrong?" one of them asked. I saw him," Jane stammered. "Reynolds, he's down there." The room fell silent. Then, one by one, her colleagues started to laugh. "Good one, Whitaker. You really had us going," said Officer Collins, patting her on the back. "No, you don't understand," Jane insisted, her voice shaking. "He's really down there?" Collins' smile faded. "Reynolds has been dead for 10 years. There's nothing down there but old files and rats." Jane's protests were met with skepticism, but the fear in her eyes convinced Collins to check it out. Armed with flashlights, a small group of officers descended into the basement. They returned half an hour later, shaking their heads. "Nothing down there, Whitaker. Just a draft and some weird noises from the pipes." But Jane knew what she had seen. The next night she stayed late, determined to find answers. She pored over the files, her mind racing. As the hours ticked by, the precinct grew quiet once more, and then she heard it, the sobbing, faint but unmistakable. Grabbing her flashlight, Jane steeled herself and headed back to the basement. The air was colder this time, and the darkness seemed thicker, more oppressive. The sobbing grew louder, echoing off the walls. She followed the sound to the far corner, where Reynolds had appeared the night before. "Michael," she called out, her voice barely more than a whisper. The sobbing stopped, and a chill ran down her spine. She felt a presence behind her, cold and menacing. Slowly she turned around. Reynolds stood inches away, his lifeless eyes staring into hers. He opened his mouth, and a guttural scream filled the air. Jane felt herself being pulled into the darkness, the cold seeping into her bones. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The next morning, Officer Collins found Jane's flashlight at the top of the basement stairs, its beam flickering weakly. Jane was never seen again. To this day, officers at Elmwood Precinct report hearing strange noises from the basement, whispers, footsteps, and sometimes the sound of someone sobbing. Few are brave enough to investigate, and those who do never stay long. The legend of Michael Reynolds and Jane Whitaker has become part of the precinct's dark lore, a chilling reminder that some secrets are best left buried